Just 1 second.
Yep.
Here the queue.
Okay.
Okay.
Do you need a copy of the agenda?
No.
Brian, please.
Oh, yes.
You have one?
Which is unusual, but I do have. Good morning, everyone, to the Board of Assessors meeting, August 8th. Let's see, I need to read this. This meeting will be video recorded and broadcast over local access channel 8 and through the town website at www.eastham-ma.gov. And I would like to welcome new members to the Board of Assessors, Mr. Brian Valali and Mr. Andrew Scott.
Thank you.
I appreciate both of you coming forward to help out. It's a small group, and so everybody is important. I'd also like to take the opportunity to thank Joanna Buffington, who has been on the board, I think, for like 12 years, a long time, and Wendy Walsh, who was on the board for, I think, 3 years. Both were very helpful in putting forward the points that we had to do and make the decisions that had to be made for the Board of Assessors. And what do we have here for the agenda? I guess, did we have actual minutes?
So we have the minutes. I don't know if you saw in the email, you were the only actual member who's still existing who was at that meeting. So
Okay.
in order for us to ever approve these minutes, we'd have to watch the video. I don't know if either of you, oh, you did, okay. So we are able to take action on that. I don't know if you looked over the actual minutes.
I'd like to make a motion that we approve the regular minutes and the executive minutes for the Board of Assessors for April 4th. So seconded. Okay. All those in favor? Aye. Okay. Just so you're aware, if there was going to be any discussion about the executive minutes, we would wait till we went into executive session in order to do that. If nobody has anything, then we just do it at the same time.
Eight.
8 feet.
Yep.
There you go.
Yeah.
And now it's up to you.
Okay. So a bit of update, director's update. I was also wanting to welcome our new members to the board. I know it's a commitment. It's more than other boards have to do potentially with having to take that course 101. But as we move through the tax rate setting process, we need at least 2 certified assessors, or they consider them assessors, on the board who have taken at least module 4 of the course. So we were not technically qualified to set our tax rate until you know, you guys went ahead and did that. So luckily Brian, you were sworn in a little while ago. I think you've been on the board for, we haven't had a meeting, but you've been on the board for a couple of months. So Brian was able to take module 4 and actually complete the whole 101. So thank you very much for your tremendous effort in doing that. I know it's quite a task, especially in the summer, to just take that on. So we appreciate that. We can now move forward with, you know, all the forms that need to be signed in order for us to be once you set the tax rate here. So thank you, congratulations. And also congratulations to Alex. She completed her last course, the use path course. That was the last course needed to get her MAA certification, or designation rather. So now she has obtained that. They've had the meeting and she has her number and she can officially.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
And that was quick, because
Yeah.
what, year and a half or so?
2 years.
2
You
years.
have to have 2 years of
That's a
assessing.
minimum requirement, yeah.
So, but
Great,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah, a lot faster than many do it these days, you know, it's definitely a challenging thing, especially when you have work and life and children, and so we're very proud.
Thank
Job
you.
well done. And as far as just office ongoings, beginning of a new fiscal year, it obviously starts our exemption period. You'll all come to know this as we kind of move through the times, but July 1st, we send out all of our statutory exemptions for blind, veteran, seniors, all the different programs we have for the state. So those come pouring back in, and there's a lot of questions and paperwork and meetings that we have to approve their exemptions so that they can get their reduction in their tax rate. So we're dealing with that a lot right now.
Most of those are repeats, but.
Yeah.
It all depends. There can be quite a few new ones. too.
Yeah. And we're working with the COA to have a few different kind of getting the word out programs. Make sure that all the seniors out there who are eligible for this, the senior exemption, are aware of it. And if they need any help with the process, we're available. We're gonna do some drop-in workshops and whatnot to,
There's quite a few changes happening to COA too, so I
yeah. So,
think that'll be good in a lot of respects.
good. That's definitely good. Yeah, they're great at kind of tag teaming that exemption with us, so we'll do what we can there. We also have on the horizon another program that's coming into play. It was at the state level, it needed to be special legislation that was approved, so we have the Eastham Community Fund that's now going to be coming into play. It was approved, but now it's the figuring out how the process will work and what our part will be in it. That's yet to be seen.
Is that different than the taxation aid?
It is.
Okay,
So that it's for the community at large. So there aren't really a lot of requirements. You have to show need, but there's no age or,
is there income?
I don't know all the details. I don't think there's a specific income threshold, but as long as you can display a need, maybe you have, an illness or something. So that's all gonna come into play, but it's great to have another tool in our.
Will
our
that come
belt.
before our board, or is it just something that you guys will need to do behind the scenes?
I think it's going to the select board to work out the kinks and to find out who's going to do what, and if it'll be something that they'll apply to us along with these other programs, or if it's gonna be done a different way. That's all kind of forthcoming, so. We'll get there. We have wrapped up our sales reviews for the most part. We were talking about this the other day. So we work with our vendor, our valuation vendor, PK, Paul Capinos, and they help us with all of that. So we've been reviewing the sales that happened the previous calendar year to come up with the values that we're going to set the tax rate for. So we have roughly, compared to last year and the past 2 years, it's much better. I think last year was, what was it? I don't even remember now.
Is it 12?
11 point
Yeah,
something, like
11,
that, yeah.
and then the previous year was 24. So considerable increases in the past 3 years, and this year we're looking more at 3% for a single family home. So it means that the sales have caught up with our valuations are where the sales are for the most part on average. So it's good. Nobody's gonna get a huge jump this year. Condos are more in the 23% range because they're what's selling. They're less expensive, so more affordable when everything else is. Right. So. And so we're still working on getting the rest of everything in place to move forward with the tax rate setting process. So on that note, I think that kind of jumps us on to the next bullet here, where we need to take a look at the way that we have the board organized. That's something that we're charged to do annually by the town clerk. So we presently have David as the chair, and we have a vacancy for the vice chair. And I think if we get one more member, would have to designate an alternate. But as it is, I think we just have chair and a vice chair.
Technically, don't we have a clerk? Most
I don't know.
boards do.
Okay,
And several of the boards, like I'm on the planning board, that clerk basically does nothing because somebody takes notes.
Okay.
It's played out, but technically there is a position of clerk.
Okay, I don't know if we've ever had one,
I don't know either.
but maybe we need to look into that and see if we need to designate one. But for now, I think generally the chair is one who has a good deal of knowledge and experience on the matter being discussed, so I don't know if it's a good idea to keep Davis in as chair for now, seeing as you two are both very new to this, and then maybe revisit the topic next year at this time, but that's for you guys to all decide, so.
I'm more than willing to give it up if it. But I'm also willing to stay on and do it.
Sure.
Actually, Colleen and Alex do the vast majority of, the work. And, I mean, I have input, but they do most of it, so it's not that big of a deal if one of you wanted to do it.
We'll rely on your experience for now.
I concur.
That's fine. Would one of you like to be vice chair? And the only real thing is, if I died or was sick and couldn't come to a meeting, somebody has to, in a sense, run the meeting. But basically, the agenda is all set up because read this little thing and, then you have to sign stuff in my,
Right, like the minutes that you just signed,
but there isn't a lot to that, really.
there's no homework really, besides, what's going on at the meeting. I think sometimes there's the annual report that I work on, usually just edit what we have. But yeah, for the most part, there's not too much outside of being here
Right.
that you have as a
Right.
responsibility. So,
I would like to propose that Brian become vice chair since he's taken the course and like I say, it's not a big deal, but, I just want to congratulate you on doing that. Have you looked at it at all yet?
Looked at it, but I
he was just given all the login information and everything, so,
Okay.
yesterday I gave him the password,
It,
so.
it
very
does take a little while.
Yeah.
So,
7 AM this morning, I was
Not a
looking at
copy.
section 4.
so,
Very riveting.
Did learn some stuff.
oh, yeah,
That was
no, it is.
So, good.
That's all
Yeah.
together.
There's a lot in there.
Mother.
A lot of caffeine.
Yep. So, with that, I guess I need to have a motion. Well. You want to have a motion first on making me chair? Is that the way we should do this?
Maybe two.
Yeah.
To continue to designate you as chair and then.
Yeah.
A second one for Brian, I think.
So, why don't you
Sure,
do it since
okay,
I
sure.
don't think I should do myself?
I'll make a motion for Dave to continue as chair.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, all right. And I'd like to make a motion that Brian Lavalley become vice chair. And all those in favor? Okay.
Okay.
Good.
That sounds good. We've got a board. Now, I just wanted to kind of briefly do an overview of the different things the different tasks of the board. So we have, there's a lot of signing. There's signing warrants and commitments. So when we have a motor vehicle warrant, which we have 6, 7, 8 through the year, it depends on the registry of motor vehicles. We also have obviously the tax bills. And then there's the signing of the forms in Gateway, which I actually have a little handout for. This is going to be happening soon as we submit our information to the state. They used to let you vote and I can sign on your behalf, but now they're requiring that you log in yourself and add a signature. So I've highlighted the different ones, kind of who does what. So in the red arrows, we have, and everything I've highlighted, those are the ones that the board actually has to sign. So it's as easy as, once we get the information in there, I can either just send out an email, and I don't know if we want to have 2 people kind of just volunteer to do it or see who's available that day. I know not everyone's available all the time. It's summertime. But as we go through, it's not always the same day. Probably those top 3 in red are usually done at the same time. The options and certification that's the last one at the bottom. That one's done after our classification hearing, so either that night or the next morning. We work with the clerk to get that one in there, so it's different days. But that's some of the responsibility. Then we also have, well, exemptions, you sign those are all done in meetings, or abatements, minutes like we just did, those are done in the meeting. And then we have simple one-time things, like I have an example here that we have to work on today. It's the Environmental Protection Tax Fund and the Cape Cod Commission that we annually, just the board signs to release it so that the treasurer collector can pay it. So this is one that we'll have to look at today. We sign it now because it actually goes into our tax recap and our, is it the overlay? Yes, so it's, that information has to be put onto these forms in order to move forward with it. So we get that signed in advance of when we do all the rest of the signatures. I don't know if a motion needs to be made to actually sign it.
I wouldn't think so.
I think it's just the signatures that are needed. So I guess the question, besides signing this, it would need to be, in the past, the way it's been organized is that for kind of the lower of important things, just the regular motor vehicle warrants that go out, they don't always go out in alignment with when we're holding our board meetings. So in the past, the Board of Assessors has voted to use that we can use your signatures. And then all the documents are brought at the following meetings. You can see the amount that was committed. Basically, you're just looking to see what the commitment says and that the warrant matches it. And that's what we're handing off to the treasurer collector to allow them to collect the money for. So, I mean, it's something that if you'd prefer, I could always send out a copy of these things in email. And you could say, you know, you already could have voted to use for us to use your signatures. If that's easier, or you can, I don't want to have you have to pop in every time we have a new commitment to go out, especially if you're not in town, you know.
I would, to simplify things, I would like it to go the way it has been going. You two do an excellent job, and I have no reason to think that you wouldn't continue that way. And I don't think we have to, you know, peer over your shoulder and stuff like that. Is that okay with?
Sure, that
Okay.
sounds good.
So I think we would need a motion. I don't know how you'd want to structure it for us to use your signatures or sign on your behalf.
Well, I'll make a motion that we allow Colleen or Alex, as the case may be, to use our signatures to certify documents that are then presented to the state or to the town. And afterwards would show us a copy of those documents. Need a second?
Second.
All in favor?
And for the rest of them, I'll reach out as needed and whoever's available to sign. You do have your login information now. Have you been able to log into? Yes, you did, because you got into C module 4. Okay, so I think if you ever have trouble logging in, I think Linda Sassy can help you get back in.
Oh.
She's part of the password reset process. She's the town clerk here, so.
No, is it always signed electronically or is
Yes,
okay?
it's always signed electronic. The gateway forms are signed electronically.
Okay.
And then we'll continue to do the commitment. And I guess, no, we do that with your signatures as well. But all the ones, obviously, that you're present for at the meeting, we'll use real signatures for that. Okay, and
There is one thing I'd like to add. There are several, well, a couple of times during the year where Colleen goes before the select board to present information, or mostly information, really. And it would be nice if some of us was when along to the meeting to support her. We can't always do it, but, you know, I've done it a couple of times.
Right.
And it doesn't mean, like I said, you know, if you're out of state, fine, you know.
Right.
But it would be nice to support her at the Board of Selectmen meeting.
Yeah, I do appreciate the support. It's good to have someone there to help answer questions too, and even if there's always a Zoom capacity also, so even if you just hopped on the call, you could just be there, you know. It's helpful. Usually, so we have one in the summer, the classification hearing, which we'll get into in a moment, and then we always kind of mid-year, early January, we always revisit the residential tax exemption topic because, well, just because if we were to decide to implement it, it'd be difficult to do that in August when we're trying to set the tax rate, to implement it, roll it out, get people approved, and then get it on the tax bill in that short amount of time. So it's something that we'd have to decide to do in January to roll out. So that's kind of the way it's structured so far.
It's fairly controversial as well.
It is.
You know, some select board members are totally for it, some are not. Colleen does a lot of statistical work for that discussion and does a presentation. And in the past, the board has felt very much so that it was not a good idea to do. Partly because of just the expense of doing it. It used to be a couple of years ago, I think it was close to $80,000 or $90,000 that went in, and a lot of time and effort. And then the reason kind of behind it was to help the people who couldn't afford a lot of the stuff with the houses getting more and more expensive in town. But in a lot of cases, it really wasn't going to help those people that needed the help. And so that's why the board, in essence, kind of said no, that we wanted to find other ways to help those people. And we have found several ways in the last couple of years that have been, you know, added to programs where the people could get help. I'm sorry, I don't need to.
Oh, no,
interrupt your
I'm gonna
proceedings.
get into that a little bit too I was gonna pull up some of the, because our job today essentially is to vote on the recommendations that we're gonna, you know, present to the select board to decide at the classification hearing. So I have a little, I guess, PowerPoint, just to kind of go over a little bit about what that.
Pauline, is the Environmental Protection Fund, is that pretty much the same each year, or does it go up and down a lot?
It changes a little bit, it's pretty much the same, it comes from the county, and I don't know if each town's percent of contribution stays the same, and it's
The pot
based
gets
on what they
bigger.
actually need,
Yeah.
you know?
Okay.
This is not complete at this time. I just kind of put together some of it, so you'll be able to see what I'm showing them, but we're still waiting on, we don't have all of our tax levy information. It's not finalized, so this is all kind of, it's estimated. and it's a little bit. Also, our values aren't completely set in stone, so I don't know. I was able to work up an average single family home value, but I don't have the median, so it's kind of, it'll give you the main idea. So you kind of read this as we go, but essentially the select board needs to determine if they're going to keep a single rate for the 5 classes of property or if they're going to split it up. And then there are different options beyond that to kind of give benefits to different classes. So the residential factor of 1 would be a single tax rate, and then if you shift that then. Oh, thank you. You could shift that in either direction to kind of, to move the burden from one class to another, depending on what, the composition of the town really. So these are the three different things that we have to either vote to recommend or not to recommend. So, obviously the residential exemption, like Dave was just mentioning, it comes up. It's controversial, but the board has already decided for fiscal 25 not to adopt the RTE. So we're still gonna vote to not recommend it, is because we already have essentially. So it's just a formality at this point. I think when we had our last meeting, it's clear that there's a problem. The problem is that not everybody can afford their taxes and not everybody can afford to live here, or there's no place here for them to live. And it was pretty much decided that the RTE would not solve that problem, because you are able to help some people, but you'd be helping more people than the people that need it. And in doing so, you're gonna shift that burden onto another group of people who may already be burdened, you know, so it wouldn't be solving the problem of helping those who are burdened. And that's where that Eastham Community Fund program is gonna come into play greatly, because that's for, if you need help, we can give you help. So it doesn't have to be, it's money well spent, essentially.
The towns that do have the exemption have far more non-residents than Eastham does.
Right.
There's a percentage at least.
Yeah, that's an excellent,
Provincetown is like 90%
Yeah.
or something like that. and I
90%.
think Truro is 70 or. I don't know.
yeah, so it's almost a 50-50 split here. It's 55-45, so you're really just robbing from one guy to pay another, whereas, you know, in P-Town, you can take 10 cents from everybody, from 10 people, and give somebody who needs it $1, and it doesn't really hurt anyone, but it does greatly help. So, it just doesn't really work here at that time, so they've already decided no. And there's another program that we're toying with putting into play. It came through the state as something we could adopt, the affordable rental exemption. So that's if you rent your parcel, your home, or a portion of it affordably, there'd be a reduction in your taxes. So that's something we're looking into also, because we are thinking that that could help the rental issue that we have here. So maybe those two things together would be a better tool than the RTE ever. But again, we'll look at that again in January.
Do you know if they, what is it, trying to come up with you know how you can rent, like, let's say you have an apartment and you can either, if you rent it full-time to a Eastham resident, you get some benefit from doing that. And you can either be in the rental or you can be in the house.
The ADU.
Yes. The state just passed something, and I didn't know if you know whether it changes what we have or increases or decreases.
I don't.
Okay.
I don't know. Is it a special ADU rental thing?
Yeah.
Oh,
As far as I know, it's statewide.
okay. I don't think it would change what we have already adopted as our like ADU bylaw. But maybe it's something that could be coupled with it. I'm not sure. I'd have to read about it more.
Just what,
As for commercial properties, there's a small commercial exemption that you could vote to recommend that we offer. That essentially, you'd be reducing the burden of the commercial property. But oftentimes, communities who have put this into play have seen that the business isn't necessarily the owner. So you're not helping the small business, you're helping the landlord, and it doesn't really travel over to the small business. So it's not, again, it's something that doesn't give you what you need. So in the past, the board has always voted to not recommend the adoption of the small commercial exemption. And then as for open space, it's something we have to vote on, but we don't actually have any open space, so it's very easy to recommend that we don't, adopt that. Open space, for those of you who are new, it's something that would have to be kind of tailored by the town planner and put forth to the state to be adopted. So then you have designated open space, and then I think those areas would be protected in different ways and would be eligible for different grants. But at this time, we have space that's open, but it's not class 2 open space. So. So this is just the LA4. It's not completely finalized, but it breaks down all of the state class codes on the side. So it's all the different property types. And then along the top, you'll see the different classes. You have residential, base, commercial, industrial, and then personal property. So, I mean, pretty much that number at the end gives you the 4,998,724,910 number, and that's the number that you're going to use in your calculation for the tax rate.
How do you define industrial? Do you have to manufacture something?
Yes, there's a whole, there's a state class code book, and it kind of breaks down each one and what you'd have to do to fall into that category. But yeah, it would be some type of manufacturing or plant, some type of industrial production.
I'm just surprised that we have that much.
Well, and that's the value too.
Yeah.
So there's only, well, there are 22 in between the 400 and the 442, and I couldn't even tell you what those actual classes are without looking at the book. It's another thing you'll see kind of as you take course 101, it's good reference material, but you're not going to keep it all in your head. But yeah, this is just part of, this is something that we do sign in Gateway. Once all the numbers are in there, you kind of sign to certify this looks right. It's not that you're going out there and counting them all. So that is the total taxable value that we have, and this is kind of how it's broken down. We are predominantly residential here. We don't have a lot of commercial compared to that. Kind of a little bit on the main strip, nothing really strays out from different, from Route 6. Industrial and personal property. So personal property that's, related to the businesses or the second home personal property for those who don't live here. So knowing how that breaks down helps when you take a look at what these options are and how they might help. This is just showing you kind of how values have been over the course of the past few years and where they are right now. So I only have the average single family home on here for fiscal 25. And as you can see, it actually went down slightly from fiscal 24. That's just the average, and that's still, so there is still a 3% average increase, but not everything rose, and the average home didn't actually increase. This is just where our tax rate has gone over the course of time. Kind of see that it ebbs and flows.
How come it went down so drastically when 20?
That was like the 2007, 2008. Oh, you mean from this year to that year? I don't know what happened then. 2003, 2004, was there something? Sometimes it has to do with things that the town has adopted, if there's overrides or, it could have been anything at that time or any combination of things that made it go way up. Usually not, that's not the reason that it comes way down, but so as you can see, it's estimated to go up to 755 this year, and that's because of the different projects that the town has going on, total levy that we're gonna have to raise, and the fact that usually when values go down, the tax rate goes up, inversely proportional there. I don't have this all filled out, but this is how you come up with your total levy. It's just, we take last year's levy limit, you automatically add the 2.5%. Amended growth would be something that you didn't pick up last year that came to your attention that you were able to grab the following year. Then you have your overrides, your new growth, that's basically what Alex goes out and does all the time. She's our field appraiser, goes out to, new construction, additions, anything that's coming onto the tax roll for the first time. When you capture a lot of that, that helps your levy grow. Then we have, the usual debt exclusions, the Cape Cod Commission that we are signing here today, and then you come up with your total amount to be raised, and that brings you to your simple calculation. The tax rate is just the levy divided by the total value that we saw in the LA4. Historical growth totals. We have been doing very well capturing as much as possible. In the past 2 years, we jumped way up and we've been able to float up there for a while. There's also been a lot going on with, COVID sales and construction, everything there was a boom. So we don't know how long it'll stay up there. We try to be very thorough and go through, MLS and rentals and everything, and just, we only wanna tax what's there and nothing more, nothing less. So we just try to make our data very accurate, and in doing so, we often come up with a good deal of growth. So this is what I was just mentioning. That's how we come up with our estimated tax rate here of 7.55 for this. This is just kind of a breakdown of last year to this year. I don't have, again, the median for this year yet, but last year, the average bill was 5,677, and this year it's going to be projected around 6,081, an increase of $404, based on the fact that the tax rate is going up slightly. Even though values are not really jumping much. This is just another way of looking at that. I just broke it down over the course of time, what it's looked like for the past 2 years. So less of an increase than last year. That's always easier to dish out on our end, because even though we're not the ones that make all the decisions that come down, the chain, we're still the ones that hand out the tax bill. So we have to, it's always our fault. So it's, it's easier to dish out a lower increase for sure. So back to the residential factor, considering the fact that we don't have a lot of commercial or industrial to shift to, that would really hurt that population. I think if we were to shift our tax rate to lower it for the residential and put it on the business, it would drive business away. So in the past, we've always voted, like I said, to not recommend the adoption of this. We can vote on all these at the end. This is what we just went over, the residential exemption. Don't want to rehash it too much, but obviously voting to not adopt it again. And we'll meet in January. Open space, there is none. So, and small commercial, like we just discussed. That it would only be available to the commercial properties, but that the business doesn't always benefit from it, so we usually don't recommend that either. So this is usually what I leave up at the end of the meeting, so that to guide the select board to accept our recommendations and vote them in before certifying everything. So do you all want to consider those recommendations now and see if we want to vote on that?
For the second bullet, the residential exemption, that doesn't include like senior, veteran, all the normal stuff, but
No, it's really just if you meet the qualifications, which would be, this is your domicile, you're on the census here, your motor vehicle, if you drive, is here, your tax return is from this property, then you'd be considered a resident. And eligible for the exemption, and so then you take a little bit off, you'd have to decide how much, basically, you take that off of the eligible ones. And basically, the tax rate would increase because you have to shift it around, and the others who aren't eligible would pay more. So everyone's tax rate goes up because of it, but not everybody gets the break. So it just kind of shifts it over to the others.
Gotcha.
And can I ask about open space?
Yes,
You say you have space that is open, but it is not open space.
right.
How do you set something aside as open space?
So, I mean, we have the ability in the assessor's office to discount it, but we're not the ones who implement putting it in place, so I don't know all of the steps. Essentially, it would be something that the town planner would do as part of the comprehensive town plan, where you're kind of having a goal for certain parcels or for certain developments, where you're saying, we'll allow this to be developed, but the space around it must remain open, and they would have to present this to the state, and the state would have to accept it and designate all those parcels open. And it puts some type of perpetual or time limit conservation restriction on it, essentially, and I think it makes them eligible for different grants to help make them more enjoyable to the public, like recreation or something like that. So I don't know if that's something that they're working forward or working towards with the town planner. But we don't, all I know is that we don't have any at this time, and it would take a while to get it. It's quite a process.
And we really don't have many places that have acreage that would be open space. There's a few.
Mhm.
But there's not many.
No, and I think for the most part, the town has gone a similar direction. It's to the same effects, essentially, by purchasing properties, putting conservation restrictions on them, making them, long-lasting open space without having them part of, some master plan. It's just so to the same end.
All looks good to me.
Well, I'd like to have, make a motion that we accept the recommendations as stated in this presentation.
Second.
All those in favor?
And that essentially ends the general part of our meeting, so we can close this part and hop into executive, not to return.
Just a question. You mentioned PK. How big an organization is that?
Pretty big. So they're statewide, run out of Hadley, South Hadley. But they have an office on the Cape as well in Sandwich, and so they do, I'd say, a majority of the Cape towns. There's other vendors, Vision and Patriot, that a few different towns on the Cape have, but for the most part, we all use PK, and then other towns around, like, Situate and out in Western Mass. I don't know how many towns they do altogether, but they're very familiar with the market here and the different things that would come into play with kind of a destination location like the Cape, where you can have different neighborhoods just that are divided by a road depending on what that road is abutting, and it's just kind of it's a special market down here, and they're very familiar with the inner workings of it.
And that's a long-term contract, or is it a yearly? contract?
We're in a 5-year contract with them, and they also help do all of our valuation process, as well as we use their CAMA system. So I don't remember, computer.
Is it a good idea to keep the same group? Or is it better to change vendors every once in a while? So
It's very costly and complicated to change vendors, because all of the information it doesn't just copy over, it's a different format. So you'd have to redo your entire database and transfer all the data into new field cards and develop a relationship with, a different vendor. Yeah. So I am very happy with the work that they produce for us. They're very they're very accessible, both their IT and their evaluation team, so they're very good at working with us. In both ways, they bring concerns to our attention and we do to theirs, and it's pretty seamless, so.
I was just curious.
Yeah.
So,
Most stick with what they have, but I mean, some have flipped.
all right, thank you.
So do we want to
Oh,
make a motion?
yeah. I'd like to make a motion that we adjourn the general or the regular portion of the Board of Assessors meeting and not to return to it. And we'll go into executive session at 11:47.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. So at this point, we stop the recording.